Okay, well, welcome. I don't know exactly how I don't know how you got chosen, but I'll say congratulations to those of you who got chosen. I'm going to give you a brief background about myself. I am a product of agricultural education and those blue and gold jackets. Long before you were born, but I was an FFA member. I do serve as your National FFA advisor and consider that an honor and a privilege. I'm just a common person with uncommon responsibilities. In FFA, there was 36 in my graduating class, and our FFA chapter was about 36 people. So it gives you an idea. It wasn't a large school. I was a state officer, but I did not ever receive the American FFA degree. I wanted to run for national office, but never had I could not get the American FFA degree at that time. So did not have that opportunity. So that's enough about me. So I think we're ready to just go right in and dig into the questions. So I'm pretty flexible. So is there anybody that just wants to volunteer to go first? Who's got that first burning question to break the ice?
I'll go for it.
Okay.
Okay, my name's Kyla. I'm from Broken Bow. FFA.
Kyla from Broken Bow. Okay.
What are your responsibilities as National FFA Advisor?
What are my responsibilities as National FFA Advisor? Well, one of the things I do is I chair the National FFA Board of Directors. So that means that I prepare the agenda and help make sure all the documents for each board meeting are there for the board members to review prior to the meeting. And some board meetings, not all, but some board meetings can have up to 100 documents that have to be prepared and reviewed. I do not prepare all of those. The National FFA staff does, but it's financial reports, proposals, reports from the delegates, for example. All of those documents are there for board members to review, and then we have board discussion about how we should propose to move the organization forward. So that's one of my major tasks. I also, I'm at your state convention, I go to about 5 state conventions a year. My philosophy behind that is I think it's important to be well grounded on what FFA members think and what is the challenges and the opportunities and things that we ought to be doing from the national perspective. So I try to do that at state conventions. I'm also at some other events such as a state leaders conference. Some years I've been to the Washington Leadership Conference and visited with the teachers and the students at that conference there in Washington, D.C. I also sat on some other boards and committees, such as the National Council for Agricultural Education. I sat on that board or that council, and so therefore have responsibilities there. Okay? Who next, okay?
I'm Laramie Coffey from Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think your greatest impact on the National FFA organization has been?
Wow, you're asking a good question. My greatest impact. I'll share 2 or 3 things that I think, and some of those things are before your time, but when I was a state staff member, and I didn't tell you that, I taught for 5 years as an agriculture teacher. I was a state staff. Some of you know Mr. Boggs, who was I did that for 23 years in Missouri. A little different than his position, as I was also a district supervisor. So I had started with 36 schools and ended with about 50 schools that I had responsibility to work with their teachers, their programs, their administrators. So one of the things that I did in that is the American FFA degree. And one of the speakers I heard today talked about seeing a need, and there was a need for the American FFA degree to be done electronically. And the national organization had tried a couple times and it had not worked. And I actually, in the 1990s, before you were born, I actually developed the American FFA degree in Microsoft Excel. Not only did I do the American FFA degree, I did the Proficiency Awards and the National Chapter Award and the scholarship application. I developed all those in Microsoft Excel, and they were used nationally. So, and they used them for about 10 years. before advances in technology, those kind of things. So that's something I guess I'm proud of a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't be, but because there was 40 or 50,000 FFA members that completed an application that I developed. And I did this outside of my regular workday, but I saw a need and thought it could be done and was able to do that. So that's one thing. In my tenure as National FFA Advisor, and it's because there's good staff, it's not necessarily because me, but the organization has grown over 100,000 members, and that's conservative. It's more than that, has grown over 100,000 members. So that means that I take that is that we're doing the right things. We may not be doing things right, but we're doing the right things to try to move this organization forward for the future. And so that growth, maybe, some could argue that maybe it could have grown more, but at least we have been a growth pattern. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to serve in this role when that was occurring. Good question. Making me think a little more about that as my journey through FFA and through this role will someday come to an end. Yes, sir.
My name is Riley Scott, Central High FFA chapter. I have an ag teacher who's been teaching ag for over 40 years. In fact, this year will be his 43rd year. And one of the things that he has asked me several times in preparation for today is there is a national shortage for agriculture education teachers. And I was curious as to what you can do through the FFA organization to help, sort of help that.
Well, for me personally, I always look for opportunities, even when I'm at conventions like this, to try to promote FFA members considering becoming agricultural education instructors, teachers, FFA advisors. And I think it's a critical, and yes, we do need more of them. In certain pockets, certain areas of the U.S., there is, at least currently, there's an ample supply, but there are areas where we know on the horizon is we're going to be short of the needed personnel we need to teach ag. So one of the things that I can do and you can do also is to make sure you promote the agricultural education teaching profession. And I've shared this many times with people. I truly believe and am convinced that if you go to college and get a degree in agricultural education, there's one thing I can pretty well guarantee you. You are employable. Even if you choose not to teach, and not everyone that goes to college and wants to become a teacher, whether it be in agriculture education, elementary, English, science, whatever, finds out that may not be for them. But I can tell you in agricultural education, you're employable. Because if you say, I don't want to teach, there are other skills that you've learned through communications, sales, variety of things. So you and business and industry tell us that we look for people that has an agricultural education and FFA background. So even if I want, my bias is I want you to teach, even if you only teach for a few years, because lots of times people that start teaching, they enjoy it, they like it, and if your ag teacher's taught 44 years, I hope there's somebody already thinking about, he's going to retire one of these days, and have you thought about who's going to be that next teacher in that school? The other thing that I encourage ag teachers to do is they work hard. I'm not going to say they do not. And I'm not sure they're compensated as well as they could be or should be for their workload. But I can tell you it is a very rewarding career because they have people in their classroom just like you. And the biggest tribute that you can give to an ag teacher is for you to be successful. And it may not be teaching ag, it may be other things, but your success as an individual, as a person, is their success. And it doesn't matter if you decide to go on to college and graduate from college, or if you want to go right into the world of work in business industry right out of high school, or you want to do a 2-year technical training, whatever it might be. That success is their success. They're proud of that. because I truly believe that their interest, their sincere interest is to help you succeed. Okay? Okay, I'm going to go here and then I'll come back. That's okay.
Karsten Cantrell from the SkyTech FFA chapter.
Mm-hmm.
My question is about how agriculture has obviously changed and evolved from every single year that passes. So where do you think we as agriculturalists and FFA members are going to be in 10, 15, 20 years?
If I knew the total answer to that, I could probably be wealthy and I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I think what you have to be prepared for as a student is, you've hit the word, change. I'll use myself as an ag teacher, as an agriculture teacher. We didn't have computers to start with. I know that might be hard to believe, but we didn't have computers in our agriculture program. And we got computers. And then we started doing our experiential learning, or SAE, as you would probably know it as, records on computer. So we've progressed. I don't think that progression is going to change for the future. I think it's going to get quicker. You'll probably do your at records, and some may already be doing that on your cell phone. And I believe in embracing in the use of technology for that future, and not to, I know in my own children, sometimes they said, oh, you couldn't bring a cell phone to school, or you couldn't have it out during class, or this kind of thing. I look at it as a tool. And yes, can you be doing things that you shouldn't be during instructional time, but you can also use it as a real tool for you. And the other thing is we tend to want to, we have some knowledge events and some things like that where we memorize things, but I've questioned a little bit how critical is that, because you have that right at your fingertips. You can find out if an Angus cow is black pretty quick on your cell phone. So do you need to remember that fact? Do you need to have that, as I say, clog up my hard drive with it, with some of those kinds of things? But I think technology will continue to be moved rapidly. Our challenge, as most of you probably know, is we're facing a very strong population increase by the year 2050. You can probably quote me all the numbers. I think it's 200 million or billion or what, that we're going to have in the world to feed. And it's going to challenge agriculture to do that. We're going to have to be more and more efficient. And I also think one of our greatest upcoming challenges will be water. We tend to be a little bit wasteful, and we take it for granted. We turn that faucet on and let it run until it gets cold or hot or whatever. But I think we're going to find out that we're going to be challenged to have enough water to be able to produce the food sources that we need to sustain society. I don't know if that answered your question, but I don't have a magic ball into the future. But I also know that we as an organization have to be also prepared to try to make sure that we're developing what I call the employability skills, the leadership skills, and those types of things, so that you can be successful however that change occurs.
Thank you.
I'm Pace Middlestat from the Amber Polk Acid FFA chapter.
Okay.
And obviously our organization has been trying to be inclusive of all sectors of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just be curious to know how we continue to increase diversity in the FFA while still remaining an agriculture organization.
I wish I knew the answer to that one, but I know from the national level we have formed an inclusion and diversity committee, or a task force that's looking at how can we do that. And it's the same way. I had a discussion with an advisor yesterday, and we talked about how that our experiential, or SAE, I call it our degree programs, may have to change a little bit. They are highly focused on production agriculture, and I want to assure you that I believe production agriculture is important, but how are we providing enough opportunity for students who may not be, their family may not be highly engaged in production agriculture. They may be a part of agriculture and the processing. It may be in landscape management. You know the gamut of the broadness of the agriculture industry. So I think we have to take a hard look. Do we have in our ceremonies, in our degree requirements, in our awards such as proficiency, do we have things in there that are not allowing us to be more inclusive. And what's hard, and I don't mean this disrespectful, I look around this room, all of us are Caucasian. And that's not necessarily a total reflection of our society. And so how do we make sure that we've included non-Caucasians in our programming and that we make them feel welcome, help them to feel a part of it, and help them to be engaged. And they may have a different cultural background than we have and approach things differently. And it's just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad, it's just different. So anything you can do as students to also include in your local chapters to do that is helpful. The challenge I know for some of you will be is you are a reflection of your community because you live in a community that's predominantly Caucasian. But that doesn't mean we still don't need to have an understanding of those that are outside of that ethnic group. And I encourage you to continue to look at things, and we are looking nationally at how we can do that. Yes, sir.
I'm Easton Ray from the Bing FFA chapter. What are a few goals for this year and the future years leading up that the National FFA organization had?
Goals. Well, the previous question really hit on some of that. We have to look at how can we be more inclusive. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. We have to make sure that we are doing to be more inclusive. I think a second goal is how do we sustain this organization? We're 92, I think this is your 93rd convention is what I think I heard. And so as we look to 100 years, you know, how do we make sure that this, whatever structure, model, whatever we're doing is sustainable for the future, for future generations? So I think that's some of our goals. We also have made a lot of changes at National FFA as far as how we work with those that are our sponsors or partners, how we recognize them and how we value them. This year, how many of you have been at National Convention? I know we're on, but okay, so the National Convention is going to have some major changes. For example, the general sessions will not be in Bankers Life, they will be in Lucas Oil Stadium. So that's a change. That means also that we can change from 3 opening sessions, that we only have 2 opening sessions. We're going to do that, and so we're going to try some things, and those are things that we think will help to service our membership. I don't mind, I don't make any reservations. I also ask the question when it comes to National FFA Convention, how big is too big? When do we ever get to the point where there's so many people that you don't feel engaged or a part of the convention? And I hope that we try to figure that out, because I want each and every student to be engaged as best they can. The one thing, and I will challenge you, those of you who've been to National Convention, those of you who may not, but maybe you're going to be there in the future, maybe you're going to be America Degree recipient, whatever, it's real easy to talk about at National Convention. We had a lot of fun. We did this, we did this, we did this. But I want you to ask yourself the question, what did you learn from it? What one nugget, what one thing did you learn? And hopefully you learned more than one thing, but what did you learn from it? And that's sometimes what you need to share with your peers. It doesn't mean that you don't share that we had a great time and we did this. We went to the rodeo, or we went to there won't be another Garth Brooks concert this year, but we did those types of things that I'm aware of. Now, it could happen, but I don't think, so you talk about that, which is great. But if I'm a partner, if I'm a business person, if I'm a local school board, whatever it might be, that's supporting or making sure that you have that opportunity, did you learn something while you're there? So I think those are some of the things we're looking for. The organization's going to change, because that's going to happen this October. The federal charter as we know it, or as I knew it, has changed, has been modified. That was passed in February. So they will be the delegates at the National FFA Convention will be determining what we call the governance structure for the organization. Who's going to serve on the board, how many people is going to serve on the board, how that structure looks. So it is going to be, we're in a time of change.
My name is Landry Chaplin. I'm from the Weatherford FFA chapter.
Okay?
You talk a lot about National FFA Convention changing.
Mhm.
Do you foresee it moving to a new location that it hasn't been previously?
I can tell you only what I know. We bid the convention out for at least 7 years in advance. And so the last bid was just recently, or we did a convention site review and selection and asked community cities to apply and that type of thing. It was narrowed down to 2, and Indianapolis was selected as a city, and that's through 2032, I think it is. It goes from 2027, maybe it's 25 to 32. That's when it would, somewhere in that range. So it is, now that doesn't mean it can't change, but we've had to go ahead and make a commitment to at least look to the future, because when you think about an attendance of 65 to 70,000, it could go higher. Communities and cities have to be prepared for that. And it's not like just get on a school bus and going. I mean, it's like, if you think about, I bet some of you are not even, your community isn't 70,000 people, so it's like moving 70,000 people around, and there are things that happen in a community of 70,000 people. There are, sadly enough, there's a few accidents and injuries and things like that, and we have to be prepared for that. Can be bad weather, all kinds of things, traffic, and so the staff, what most people see out front of the convention, and their experience is really, but they don't know all, or not aware of all the things that go on behind the scenes, such as security, those kinds of things, fire, and people monitoring the weather, so we know if there's going to be a weather issue, so that we're prepared for that we have preparation already made for safe areas, all kinds of things like that. So there's a lot of those kind of things that go into a convention. We have kicked around the idea, or at least I personally have, of do we need regional conventions? Do we need regional, and would that allow more opportunity for students? The hard concept behind that might be, is that we might not have, and this will be hard for, you would be the national winner from the central region in livestock production, which would be probably pretty near and dear to Oklahoma. But we wouldn't necessarily have everybody come together at once. We don't know if, it's just a concept. I'm not sure it's doable because there are costs involved. So it'd be like having 4 NASH conventions, and there's cost involved with that too. And so I haven't figured all that out. Probably will not be, it probably won't happen during my tenure, but it's something to think about. We've also have discussed whether or not we limit the number of students who attend the NASH convention. That has been done in the past. Before your time, when the convention was in Kansas City, it was limited to 6 students per chapter, or 10% of your membership. So if you had 100 members, you could bring 10. If you were a small chapter of 30, you could bring up to 6. Basically, the 6, I think some of the concept was you had 6 corps officers, so that was 6. Doesn't mean you had to be officer to be there, but that's where they came up with the 6, and then 10% of your membership. And then I think there was probably some allowances, and that did not include your career development events, your leadership development events, or your American degree recipients. It would not include those in that count. But that's how we did it in Kansas City, because it was a much smaller facility. But that's how it was done at that time. I don't know that we'll go there. I don't, that always creates a challenge when you limit things. But good questions. We haven't gone this side of the room, so I want to make sure. And have you asked one before?
I have not.
Okay.
I'm Caleb Snodgrass from Owasso. As traditional farming practices are becoming less prevalent, as technology is kind of becoming more prevalent, what are some struggles or benefits you see with the FFA's relationship with direct agriculture or farming more specifically?
Well, most every one of us have 3 meals a day. So we cannot ignore or take for granted production agriculture. It may look different, it may be handled differently because of technology, but it will not go away. But it may not be as traditional as what we know it now. I've been to conferences where we do vertical farming, where they're growing lettuce and tomatoes, and it's grown on a hydroponically up and down. So it's grown vertical. And so there's a place in New York called the Green Machine, I think it is, and it's in the Bronx. And they grow things on rooftops, anywhere they can find a spot, they're growing plants. And so we have to think of that traditional agriculture, even in my tenure, it used to be we pulled a plow, a moldboard plow is what it was called. And you don't see, almost all those are sitting in the fence row rusting or not, because we don't do that anymore. That kind of tillage doesn't mean it's not done in a few places or once in a while, but it basically, that kind of conventional tillage is no longer a current practice. And I think the practices will continue to change. How can we place, for plants, how can we place that fertilizer that plant needs and that moisture and the nutrients as close to that seed as it can get, and just what it needs, not extra, but just what it needs at the right time, in the right place, in the right amount. If you take in the animal industry, I think we're looking, we already have poultry, swine, you can name it, where we're in confinement, those kind of systems, and they're trying to perfect some of that, getting the most gain for the least amount of input. And so I think we'll continue down those roads. I had an opportunity one time to go there in DC and go visit with a NASA astronaut who actually had spent time on the space station. To give you an example, they grow lettuce, but there's one of the light waves that they don't use because lettuce doesn't need it. I want to say it's one of the, I don't know if it's red, green, what color, but I think it's green, but I can't tell you that for sure. I should know, but it doesn't need that. So they don't use the energy to put that kind of light on those lettuce because they don't need it. So I think we'll be continuing to look at that kind of concept. How can we make sure, whether it's animals or plants, how we can grow things the most efficiently? I think we also have to consider, do we need to change our dietary requirements as a society, as a population? Yes, I like steak and I like beef and those kind of things, but I think we have to look at we need to do things in moderation. It's not to exclude it, but we need to do it in moderation. Okay.
I'm Delaney Pippin from the Oklahoma Union FFA chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us a little more driven detail about the FFA federal charter?
Okay. The federal charter as it existed, Public Law 105-225, had two or three things that it specified that the national advisor and board chair is actually the Secretary of Education. But through what's called a delegation of authority, the Secretary of Education delegates that down to the position I currently serve in. There was also a position called the National FFA Executive Secretary, and that was also designated in Public Law 105-225, as well as the Department of Education selected 4 board positions, 4 board of director positions. And so that was the previous charter. What has changed, the 4 board positions now will be selected by the profession. The executive secretary will be selected by the board. And the national, the Secretary of Education will have a position on the board of directors or their appointee. Kind of like right now. I mean, they do not necessarily have the time in their demand for their time energy to serve on the board. So they can have an appointee. The board will determine who is going to be the national advisor and board chair, and the board will determine who will be the national FFA executive secretary. And there is some additional positions added to the board of directors as proposed. I need to make sure I make that very clear. Some of the things, the latter items I'm describing are what's proposed in the national Constitution and bylaws amendments that will be considered by the delegates at this year's convention. And so there would be an additional, basically it moves the board to, so there are 2 teacher educators and 2 teachers, and there's 4 state staff. And I'm going from memory here, so I don't know if I have, there's be 1 agribusiness person. The board should be, if I add all this up, should be about 13. There is a National FFA Executive Secretary, and there's a National FFA Treasurer. And those will be selected by a committee, a board nominating committee or a board committee. So that makes up, that's the proposed changes. So it will be different. The role that I serve in will not exist as it does today. How the board and the makeup decides to, and there's a little more complication to this, but time's not going to allow us to get into some of the detail. There's a proposal that has steps on how the board who would serve as the national advisor and board chair. There's step 1, that's option 1, there's an option 2, and there's an option 3. So when the proposal, again, underlying proposal was written, it provided 3 options based upon future direction. The one thing is, also in the proposal is board members will serve 3 years, and that will be rotating so that about 1/3 of the board goes off each year. So through the first transition period of time, there'll be some that may only serve a year, some may serve 2 years, some may serve 3 years, until they get a rotation established. Hopefully that helps. I don't have all the detail, I'm going from memory, but that's pretty well. And again, that's proposed. I don't know how many of you know, just so you're aware, that this is a student organization. So constitutional and bylaws proposals has to be out to state associations by March 1st. So those have to go out to the state associations by March 1st. The other item with that, there are 3 entities that can propose constitution and bylaws changes. That's state associations, the national FFA officers, and the National FFA Board of Directors can all submit proposals to the delegates for consideration. So that's how that works and occurs. Other questions? You've been patient.
Hi, I'm Piper Turner, and I am from the Edmond FFA chapter.
Mm-hmm.
In my high school, a semester of Oklahoma history is required to graduate. Do you think that a semester of agriculture education should be required to graduate in Oklahoma? And if so, should the focus be on a career tech in agriculture or strictly on agricultural education?
Good question. Not sure I have the answer to it, but I want to propose some things. How many of you like requirements? So think about that. I mean, when you're required, I think sometimes it probably should be suggested, but as something that is recommended maybe, but that you complete, even the agriculture. The other thing I think needs to happen is, are there opportunities for that you do not have to take it during the regular school day? Could you do it after school, online? Are there other options? Or if you already have that basic knowledge, can you test out of it? So I think there needs to be thought in how that occurs so that it's not, yes, it's good for everyone to know about Oklahoma's history as well as the history of agriculture or agricultural education. I don't think that's a bad thing, where your food comes from. And we have some of the most informed consumers that we've ever had in our history because information is more readily available. Cell phones, internet. Just because it's on the internet does not necessarily mean it's true. But you have access to a considerable amount more information. So how can we use that to our advantage, and keep people informed, but may not need to require it, but would sure recommend that you have a certain knowledge base. Okay, have we missed any? Has everyone, okay.
I'm Jake Percival from the Calumet FFA chapter.
Mhm.
You keep talking about the delegates. Have y'all thought about changing the size of the delegates? Considering Oklahoma is one of the largest and we only have 17. Texas has a lot.
That has been a point of discussion. Maybe I better choose the right words. It's been a point of discussion for almost 10 years. And there has never been a proposal that has been accepted. But I think it's also one of those factors that we as a national organization are looking at. Is there a better way to represent the student voice than 475 delegates? I can tell you I was at the convention in Kansas City, Missouri as a state staff when we decided the delegates approved the 475 delegate proposal. Why 475? I'm not sure I can tell you or anyone else can, but it was just a number that seemed to fit at that time when we had, you know, at least 100,000, more than that, probably 120 to 150,000 less members than we have today. So I think it's going to be something that's going to continue to come up. I don't know that we have all the answers to that. I know there's some previous proposals have been that we have a House and a Senate. There's also been proposals that at least 50% of the states have to ratify a particular action that the delegates want to take, but the delegate body has not chose to approve that. In the current delegate body, the challenge is also that it is reflective, the states that are have certain membership numbers. It is a percentage of membership. There's some basic, every state's guaranteed, I think, 2 members, and then it's percentaged out after that. So as large states get larger, they still have a strong percentage or a higher percentage of the FFA membership. And if it's a student membership organization, how do you provide the right balance? And I know that we have a House and Senate nationally or at the federal level, and sometimes that can be a challenge too, and I have to be careful what I would say there. So has everyone had an opportunity to ask questions? Okay, okay.
My name's Gus Sumner from Luther.
Mm-hmm.
As our numbers rise in members,
Mm-hmm.
how are we attracting sponsors or investors and increasing our money?
Well, if I'm a business and I have an opportunity to talk, to have some kind of potential contact with 100,000 or 200,000, what am I going to do? I'm probably going to choose the larger. So I think we do have business and industry that are looking at us, and we have worked hard to try to build those relationships and partnerships with business and industry. Last year, I know here at this convention you have a blue room. Blue Room Oklahoma, I think is what it's titled. Well, last year was our first Blue Room, but we had new partners there, such as Microsoft, and there are others that are saying, hey, we want to be a part of that. So as I think people see the potential to have access, at least to share their message about their business or their product, that will normally occur. Doesn't mean we don't need to work at it, but I think we are working at it very hard to look at, for no better cliche, think outside the box of where we might be able to have a relationship with sponsors or businesses that we've not traditionally thought of, especially as agriculture changes, that technology changes. Why would we not want to be connected or have a relationship with those entities that represent that change in technology? The other thing I would say, I use the word relationship, but with relationship there has to be trust. That the speaker this morning talked about You say what you do what you say you're gonna do. I may be paraphrasing what he said a little bit, but that's pretty close. Well, there has to be trust that when you're working with stakeholders, when you're working with business partners and people that you want to have a relationship with, there has to be a trust factor. So who have we left out? Who is our timekeeper?
We have 20 minutes left.
We have 20 minutes left. That means we can have more questions. Maybe I was too brief, but maybe not. So who has a secondary question that they would like to ask?
I'll take it. Piggybacking off of what a few of them have said about technology and how it's influencing production agriculture, it's actually interesting. I wrote an essay for the Culver's Company. Basically, it's a scholarship opportunity. The topic of the essay was the average production agriculturalist is 58 years old. So my question to you is, as technology becomes more relevant, how can we convince people who have been producing agriculture the same way that maybe technology is the way to go?
I think you're right on in your comment. I don't think because you're more, I'll use the word more mature, does not mean you're not progressive, especially in today's agriculture. If you're going to survive, you're going to have to stay ahead of the technology and the advances in technology. That doesn't mean, as you've identified, that there are people closer to my vintage that are in production agriculture that one of these days are going to retire. And so who's going to be that next generation of agriculturalists? And some of you are probably sitting around this table right here. And it doesn't matter if you're male or female or whatever it might, your ethnic background, or, you're the ones that this world is going to be depending upon to embrace that technology. But I can also tell you that just because, and you are correct, there are some that's using old technology, but are old practices, but some of those have been proven time-tested true and are efficient. And so you can't just discard some of those, because that may be the most efficient way that they have learned over time, that is the most efficient way. Technology has not found something that has made it better. So you don't always want to discard previous practice that might be effective. But you also, as you've identified, you need to be looking and observing, are there new practices, new methods, new technology that can replace that are as efficient or even better? I'll take the strawberry industry. I know I was in Florida, and they're looking to figure out, because most strawberries are hand-picked. They're trying to develop technology, whatever, that can look at that strawberry with, I guess I would call it by camera, by eye, or whatever, and can determine whether or not it is the right color, has to be right, and then can pick that berry. Now, I don't know if they're ever going to get it perfected, but they're sure, because the amount of labor it takes and the cost for that labor to handpick those strawberries is considerable. And so there are things like that being looked at that we've got to embrace. And it's not to try to take people out of jobs, because there'll be jobs. They're just going to be different jobs. If you have that kind of you still have to have technicians, is the machine working correctly, all those kinds of things. And I don't know if they're ever going to get that done, but they're looking at it. And I'm sure that you may have been around other things that maybe where people are exploring. And I want to encourage you as young people, as entrepreneurs, to don't be afraid to try some things. You may not want to try it on a 1,000-acre field or 1,000 head of animals, but you may want to try something and say, did this work? Is it effective? Can we do it on a larger scale? Other questions? Yes,
Earlier
sir.
you mentioned how water is going to be water shortage. Is there anything that's currently trying or attempting to be done about water shortage? I don't know what I'm trying to say, but is there something around
Right,
trying to be
are we
done?
trying to address
Yes.
that? Okay, I'll give you a couple thoughts. I think yes, we are. We live currently in a country where there is still some abundance, but if you think about some areas, and even in Oklahoma, where you've had drought, this kind of stuff, it makes you wonder. So there are things, I don't know how cost effective it is, desalinization, salt water, using that to treat that so it's, the other thing, and I've observed this because of some travels in this role. I've been to Japan, and you may think it's kind of primitive or simple, but on their toilets, when you flush the toilet, there is a spigot in the back of where the tank is. There's a spigot that goes up and distributes water into, there's like a little drain there in the top or the lid of that toilet, and that's where you wash your hands. So when you fill the toilet tank, you wash your hands with the new water coming into that tank. So you don't go over to the sink and run out 1 or 2 gallons of water, whatever you do, wait for it to be warm, this kind of thing. So in my opinion, they're already ahead of us in that realm because they're already thinking water conservation. And we don't think in those terms. We think it's there, I turn the faucet on, it comes out. So I believe that there are things like that. If I think about, I've thought about it since I was there, and that's been some years ago when I saw that. And I think about, if you just think about in the United States alone, if we use that simple thing of where that fills that tank, how many gallons of water would that conserve in just one day? And how much could be produced either agriculturally or for drinking water consumed, that just that alone. And it's a pretty simple kind of thing. It's just, and is the water clean? The water going into the tank through that spigot is fresh water. All you're doing is you washing your hands, putting a little soap on them, whatever, which is going into the tank that's going through the system, which shouldn't be an issue, or I'm not aware of the issue. So therefore, that's a practice. But culturally, we're used to just turning that faucet on. And I don't know if you've noticed some of the more new laundry, wash machines. They're focused on less water. So I think there's becoming a recognition that what we take for granted, the water is going to always be there, may not always be there. Or we may need to use it to produce food rather than other things that we use for it. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think FFA should place a greater emphasis on developing technical knowledge and expertise or soft skills that could be transferred to any career?
First of all, I don't normally call them soft skills, they're employability skills, because there's nothing soft about it. And it's okay, you're not the only one that ever, it's not to put you down, but I would encourage you to refer to them as employability skills, being able to communicate, being able to work as a part of a team. The one skill, and it may not directly answer your question, what I believe we need to focus on is help students to learn how to think. And by thinking is to look at a situation, look at a problem, look at an issue, look at whatever it might be and say, how can we improve this? How can we, I grew up in an era, if the piece of equipment broke, I didn't say, well, we're done. I tried, I thought, oh, well, we can get a bolt from here. It's just a bolt missing, that type of stuff, whether it's a piece of equipment, whether it's in its technology. If the printer quits, you might need to check, see if it has paper or it's out of toner or something's jammed. And we've got to get people to be willing to, not be afraid of, to think through situations and try to solve them. And that's one, I think, the greatest attributes, gifts that in agricultural education that we can help students to do It's whether it's giving a speech, being on a parley team, livestock judging, agricultural mechanics, being able to think through and solve problems. And we need problem solvers. And so that's one of the things I feel like we need to focus on. And we've talked a little bit about traditional agricultural practice over here. I think sometimes traditional agricultural practice has helped us do that in the agricultural industry because out of necessity almost. And so I think some of your experiences too, and your experiences are different than the experiences I had growing up, considerably different. But I also had to, it's either I find a way to fix it or I'm going to have to walk a long ways or do whatever, or and so that's I think there's sometimes a fear in doing that, but you can also be overconfident. Well, I know how to do this, and then it doesn't work. So I don't know how you find that balance. Excuse me. So, but that's my hope as in agricultural education, that we help equip you to be able to think through and be able to take what you've learned in agriculture and it maybe apply to something else. And being able to say, well, here's how we did that. Well, that will work over here. If we do this step 1, step 2, we can work through this. So that's my hope. Other questions?
So it looks like we're about out of time, but in our previous conversation, you told us that we should take it as a challenge to really get the most that we can out of convention. Are there any other challenges or little bits of your vast knowledge that we can take back to our home and community, and little things of your vast expertise that we should take back with us?
Mm-hmm. One of my philosophies I make a statement, there's more than 20 students or 20 members in your FFA chapter. There's more than 20, whatever chapter size you have, if you're a chapter, but there's more than, because there's a core group of officers, committee chairs, do the bulk of the work. And my challenge to you is, how do you engage every FFA member in your chapter? How do you engage every one of them in some type of leadership and personal development through FFA? It's like, okay, how do you give them, people want to be needed, valued, appreciated, and sometimes there are simple things that we need to ask either our peers, or I'll put on my teacher hat a little bit, asking a student to help, maybe could you come and help set up for this? A student that you don't normally, not an officer, not that eager student, and all of you wouldn't be here probably if you're not those achievers in your FFA chapter or in your school. But how do you get the student that may be shy, may not be as engaged, has a difficult home situation, whatever it might be? How do you get them engaged? How do you find the opportunities for them within FFA or the agriculture education program? And that's critical. We have to address that. Here would be an example. You're here at this convention. There's 27,000 members in Oklahoma? Do I have that about right? 27,000? There's, let's say, 10,000 of you here. That means there's 17,000 that are not here. So what's happening with them? Some will never have the opportunity, may never take advantage of the opportunity to be at the Oklahoma FFA convention. You take the NASH convention, there's about, let's say, 70,000. We're not very far from 700,000 FFA members, so there's only about 10% of our FFA members that attend the NASH convention. Over a period of time, you could even say it's 10% a year, which is probably not, some people go multiple times, but even 40%. What about the other 60% that are never there? How do we make sure that their needs, their education, their leadership and personal development, how do we meet that? So that would be my challenge to you, is and ask yourself, you're a leader. There's no doubt in my mind that you're a leader within your chapter. So how do you make sure that you engage all the members in your chapter, that they feel valued, that they feel a part of that chapter? Why do students not probably come to some chapter activities and meetings? Because they don't feel a part of it. They don't feel they have a role or responsibility. So how do you do that? And I don't have all the answers for that, but I encourage you to think about, sometimes we don't think about it. Well, we just do it. You know, that's what we did last year. That's how we did it the year before. We'll just do it. So-and-so does this, and this person does this, and this person does this. But you have to think about, how can you get them to help you? How can you get them engaged? Other question? We're out of time. Is that correct?
We have 3 minutes.
Okay. We got time for one more. Or if I'm too wordy.
I have one. It's a little more casual than the other ones
That's
we've
okay.
been asking, but what is a typical day in the life of a National FFA advisor?
Typical day, okay. I'll share a little bit non-typical, but it's a little bit, I work on my health pretty hard. So I'm up at 4:30. At 5 o'clock, not every day do I get this accomplished, I'm gonna go for a 4-mile plus walk. Some would say jog, but jogging on a hard surface is hard on my joints, but I try to get a 4-mile walk in every day. And if I don't do it at 5 a.m. in the morning, I will do it at lunch. I'll walk, depends on where I'm at. I may walk at lunchtime for 30 to 45 minutes. I walk to the train station. I too take the train to the office, the Metro train in DC. So that's about, between walking to and from the train, that's about 1.5 miles. So that's more personal kind of stuff, but I try to get at least 5 miles in every day. And so that's one. Then once I do that, then I take the train. You know, that may be Metro train. I mean, something. I walk to the train station and I take the train to the office. Some people think in DC I have this big fancy office. It's a 9x9 cubicle, just like everybody else that's a federal employee. I have to go through security every day. I have what's called a secure ID, but I have to still take my bag, anything I pack with me, such as computer, it has to go through a computer scan just like you would at the airport. I also have to scan an ID to get to the elevator, and I have to scan an ID to get on my floor at the building. So security is important there. Once I get there, I'm going to put computers down, I'm going to plug them in, I'm going to get logged in. I'm going to be checking email to see what email messages I need to deal with. Both I have accounts at the U.S. Department of Education. I have an account with FFA, so I check those. Then I'm going to evaluate what do I have coming up that I need to prepare for, whether it be going to a state convention, making sure board members have the right information they need, what's coming up in preparation. So that's what I would work on during that day. Depends on the day. Sometimes I'm out of there at 4 o'clock, but that's my core hours. But sometimes it's later than that, and then it's a walk home, consume. I try to eat an early, light meal of the evening because I think that's important. And then I do typical things that you would do. I mean, I have meetings, I have church activities. I like to work with my hands, and right now I'm restoring a grandmother clock that was water damaged when our apartment was flooded, and I'm getting really close. Restoring that, and it's restoring the woodwork. So I do things like that. I have 4 children, and I have 7 grandkids. So I like to see them and talk with them and do those kind of things also. I am married. I met my wife through FFA on the steps of the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. I was there for an FFA trip. She was there for a 4-H trip. And this is, tomorrow's May 1st, right? On the end of May, we'll have been married 42 years. So that's more than you wanted to know, but but anyway. I think that's concluded our time. But I will stick around if you have other questions. I want to just say thank you. You've been a great group. I hope that I've tried to help you in some way, maybe stimulated you to think about some things in some way. and to go back to your local chapter. And I don't have all the answers. I've told groups, and I may have said it here, and it's a repeat, I'm a common person with uncommon responsibilities. I grew up in a small community, didn't even know. I had an older brother that went to college, but I was the second person in my family that went to college and completed that. So it's, it varies, but the journey's been great through FFA. FFA's taken me internationally. When I was just graduated from high school, a week after I graduated from high school, I was standing on a Danish farm in Denmark, and I worked the summer through an exchange program in FFA in Denmark. And then that program does no longer exist, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. So I've had opportunities through FFA like that are somewhat unique. I've had an opportunity to go with ILSSO, if you're a state officer and know what that is. It's an international leadership seminar for state officers. I went to Spain and Portugal. This next year they're going to Spain and Portugal. I've had the opportunity to go to the FFK, the Future Farmers of South Korea, and I spoke at their 40th National Convention, and that was very different. You had to have an interpreter and those kinds of things, and they have a lot more traditions. There's a major band, and all their dignitaries come, and you have to be very. There's all kinds of processes that out of respect for some of those. So that's some of the things that I've had opportunity to do in my journey. And you'll have similar things. They'll just be different, but they'll be similar kind of things that you'll hopefully have opportunity to do. I'm going to be quiet. Pardon?
I know I speak on behalf of everyone here, but we just can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to converse with us. So really thank you.
I'm honored. I try to get to 5 state conventions a year because I think that helps keep me grounded in what's going on. And I think I stated that earlier. And I'm honored. I'll share this evening. I've been to every state convention with the exception of Arizona that's west of the Mississippi. So, and I've probably been to about 40. And a little tidbit I will comment tonight, this is one of the best, if not the best, state convention. And I helped manage. I was a Mr. Boggs for 23 years in your neighboring state. And very similar in size and very similar in scope. But a lot of the things that I did, I probably learned from Mr. Boggs. He doesn't necessarily know that. It's kind of a message. Sometimes there are people that are watching or seeing you from afar, and you'll never realize that you ever had an influence on them. But I learned a lot from him, and when we had opportunity to visit, I would talk with him and learn some things that he was doing. I said, I'm going to try that, kind of thing. So, but you've got a great state convention. I hope you will continue to, with the technology and move Oklahoma FFA forward, and it continues to prosper and grow. With that, thank you. I don't want to keep you. I've considered it a privilege and an honor to have the opportunity to speak with you. And this is what I enjoy most about the job, is being able to talk with students like you and listen and learn from you. Even you think, well, we ask you questions, but I learn just from your questions what's on your mind, what you're thinking about, what could possibly be on the horizon, and I appreciate that.